Hello and good morning or good evening to you all. My name is Jenny, and I'm one of the technical account managers at UpGuard, working and living in the US from the great state of Florida. Thank you for choosing to join us today for August 2021 Summit. I'm particularly happy to welcome to you to this portion, which is the customer panel portion of our summit, where you get to hear from some of our customers who are willing to share their experiences and their stories on what's working for them and their processes in managing and maintaining security posture. Today's topic is around risk remediation and planning. So, first order of business, allow me to introduce our panelists. We have Sadiq, who is the Information Security Manager at Aware Super, a financial services company, and John, who is the Head of Security Operations at Iress, a financial software company. So, starting with Sadiq, can you provide a brief overview of your role and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, and good morning, everyone. It's been a lovely morning here in Melbourne. I'm Sadiq Panjwani. I work for Aware Super. Just to give you a quick background on Aware, we are basically a superannuation firm, top three in Australia region, and managing 1.5, actually 155 billion dollars funds under management. Mainly members super around Australia. We've got over 1 million members who are uh, whose money we are managing on a regular basis, and we are giving them higher returns. Just to give you a quick perspective of Aware, and I'll tell you shortly why I'm mentioning that before I share with you on my role. It's more about not only they are on the top three firms in Australia, but also they are like they are they have got the privilege of having awarded by UN as in 2021 as the highest rating for UN-backed principle of responsible investing. And not only that, they have got the first one who were the championing the climate change initiative in the world on the global scale. And then they were also their fund is like a tobacco-free fund. They were the first ones pioneered in that. So why I'm mentioning that is that it's when it comes to role, I'm managing the information security at Aware Super, mainly on the operation side of things, and that shows the diversity and the depth of Aware when we are managing such a large fund and serving the high depth of the members. That our members are from different community categories. You know, you call it health industry, you call it social industry. I mean, there's so many industries, doctors, engineers who are our members, and we love to cater them. And in my role, my remit is mainly around identifying the risk, assess the risk, and then evaluate the mitigation of risk all around and help manage the risk at especially on the information security level. And then that starts, and you can imagine that's such a broad spectrum, right? I mean, it starts from technology all the way to processes, and then the people. And technology we are talking about, I'm sure some of you in the audience would be thinking about, okay, mainly from a technology background, you're talking about ransomware and malware and spear phishing links these days coming from different places, trying to attract high profile targets in the company, and then with embedded maldocs and all that, and with a backdoor connection to a command and control center servers somewhere in Russia or somewhere else. So it's just a broad spectrum, and then my role is mainly to identify the risk in those areas. It could be the process gaps, it could be the people skills that we have to worry about, and then once it's identified, assess it, and then of course help mitigate it on a global level, and not I mean on the company level. Yeah.
Perfect. And John, it is your turn. You
I was
got to
going to say,
match up to that.
yeah, I was like, I don't know where to start. Okay, so obviously John Lonie, most people end up calling me JP. So as head of security operations at Iress, I've got sort of three main areas that my team need to look after, and one of that's threat and operational awareness, vulnerability management, and incident management, and obviously vendors play a role in that. And obviously through tools like your own, where we're able to continuously monitor those vendors, and as situations arise, my team has to get involved in dealing with that. In terms of Iress as a company, we are a software provider, but we're also a financial services provider to companies like Aware Super. And so for us, we provide solutions for superannuation funds, for wealth management, and also market trading. So we sit within that financial services ecosystem right at the heart of it. And we end up having, lots of customers, and they obviously all have their own third-party assessment programs. And so we often find ourselves on the other end of this process, and not so much as the customer, assessing other third parties. So we have a different view, I guess, to this whole process of risk management and the role in the ecosystem. And it's a big area. It's one that's quite underdeveloped, I think, and there's lots of opportunity, I think, as a industry to do a great job working with companies like your own to sort of improve and make this process really work for both suppliers and the customers who use those suppliers. In terms of my team, we're spread over multiple parts of the world. We're in the UK and Australia, and Iress has customers all over the world. And so for us, threats and risks and so forth are always happening. They're all over the time zones. And we constantly have to keep track of all of that stuff. And so for us, UpGuard is one of those products that we use to help us keep on top of what's going on.
Yeah, that's it's kind of funny. You guys are actually kind of in a similar industry, but different enough to not hate each other right now on this call. So
we're friends. We're friends.
Yeah, friends.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear if there's any similarities then for you guys, or even some differences, but how you identify cybersecurity risks. And that goes from the identification at what stage in the process. There's a lot of different places where you start assessing the situation regarding cybersecurity. And I'd love to hear, we can start with Sadiq just to keep things easy, on what your process is and how do you identify cybersecurity risks?
Yeah, it's a very broad question, to be honest. And I'm just trying to think through our process and how I do things, and along with my other team members. I generally call it, for the audience sake, I think for them to remember as well, ideally, obviously we're trying to share knowledge here and experience all around. I generally call it with an abbreviation of BISA. It's very easy to remember. And what we do at our end is, like, for example, we start with B for brainstorming. We brainstorm with SMEs, subject matter experts of different areas, digital solution deliveries, architecture, and then other sides of the business. And when we sit with them, we brainstorm, we have workshops with them. We try to do three things again in a very common fashion, and I think that's easy to remember for everyone. We conduct the what if scenarios. We make them realize, because it's all about future, right? You're trying to assess the risk which is not yet realized. It's all about future. So you start with the what if scenarios with them, and we as humans are very prone towards assumptions. We just assume things that yes, everything is fine, everything is hunky-dory, no issues at all. Yeah, let's just, there's no risk at all in anything, just move on. And so what we do is we as risk experts, we go and challenge them. We challenge the unstated and stated as well as unstated assumptions. And when we challenge them, you would be surprised that how much comes out of it, because it's just about scratching the surface, right? The more you scratch, the more you find. And that's what we have to do in those brainstorming sessions. So that's one. Then the second is, I started with, sometimes, audience may forget what we are saying as a speaker, but speaker has to remember where you started, right? So I said BISA. So second one is I. I is about interviewing different stakeholders in the company. Stakeholders could be project managers, business stakeholders, risk owners, business owners, and trying to understand what is their stake, what are they trying to achieve at the end of the day, what is the business outcome they're trying to achieve as part of the overall strategy or the business objective of the firm. That's one. Interviewing is not only internal risk, this is also, of course, external risk, like people like John and their teams. They are our vendors as well, right? So when it comes to third-party risk, we go and interview them as well. And that's where, thanks to UpGuard, of course, their platform is quite handy in that fashion, that yes, they help us arranging those attestations and the answers of different type of questions across different information security domains. And then vendors respond to those questions, and then UpGuard helps us review their responses and then come up with a risk rating on those questions, so which is very handy. So that is second part of it, which helps in the interviewing process. And the third one, I call it BISA. S is mainly about security tool set. which again, UpGuard has a role to play. They've got a separate module like breach site module or some other type of squatting module and all that, which it helps. It goes and scans the online presence of the companies and then tells us where the things are open, not only our own company, but also the third-party vendors. So third portion is S, which is, I call it systems security tool set mainly, yeah, which helps us even alert us on any thresholds, any security baselines. We set the thresholds for different companies. For example, our material vendors, we call them in UpGuard language, for example, they have to hit the score of at least 100, 800. And 800 is like out of 950 is like the best score, from our experience. And if any time they go below 800, we immediately get the alert and we inform the vendor, and they feel very happy, to be honest. And they feel very good because ultimately it's a partnership, right? I call it a marriage, no matter you want to call it husband and wife, Iress's husband or Iress's wife or vice versa. Ultimately, it's a partnership, right? We all owe each other, and we have to just make it work and in the best interest of our clients. So that was the S side, and then the last one is A. A is when the other top three you're not able to achieve internally with respect to cost or resources or time or whatever reason. Then what you do is you take the A approach, and A is just like auditors, bring the external consultants, external auditors, and let them do the job of the first three. And at times it's not only the independent consultant or auditor that will do the job for the first three, but also sometimes you need an external validation. Sometimes it's a very broad initiative, risk is very high, you need to mitigate it, and the control cost is quite high to mitigate, and you need some external help and sometimes external validation as well for the board, because ultimately board is accountable for all the business risk, right? So that's where I would say I think this is our approach.
I love that you have an acronym that you used for that, and it's got a very strong baseline in being proactive, and then having a response based on the results of your proactivity. So you act accordingly based on that information. I definitely took notes on all that, so I'm just gonna remember that.
No, that's the idea, right?
All right, so John, I might have to switch you guys too at some point because Sadiq is just giving all these answers that just set the bar for John. It's almost unfair.
Yes, indeed. I'd just defer to Sadiq. So, yeah, look, for us, it's not too dissimilar. We have what we call the Iress delivery framework, and that's a series of workshops and papers that are designed to bring together within the organization all of the parties that play a role in that feature or product or whatever it happens to be. And obviously security plays a role in that. And so that process is what allows us to explore and workshop the risks and threats and opportunities that whatever that project is designed to bring. And so, that has a number of stages. As I said, it starts off with a very broad workshop, and then it breaks down into a series of work streams, and security also engages in those work streams where appropriate. So that's I guess from a project point of view, and delivery of new products. Obviously, for me personally, being an operational role, risk is a little bit more, things like vulnerabilities or incidents or malware, phishing, et cetera, and so the response and the process of dealing with those things tends to be a little bit more immediate and a little bit more in your face. So for us, for my team, risk discovery, it's vulnerability scanning, it's OS intelligence, it's things like breach site, those kind of situational awareness of what's going on in the industry and the marketplaces. And looking for threats to our organization is what drives my team. But the more broadly, Iress is an ISO 27001 company, and so that therefore comes with a whole series of processes around risk and audit, and the way we operate our ISMS and so forth. And so that's a fantastic opportunity to identify risks within the organization, and then provide a structure for managing and remediating those things. And lastly, I'd say even our customers are only too happy to chip in. The ever reliable have you fixed X email that we get every 15 minutes after something's been publicly announced from all of our customers. So we get no shortages of risks identified to us either internally or via our customers.
Yeah. For sure. Like, I'm going to come back to kind of the process that takes to remediate them, but just on the idea still of once you've identified the next step, once you've identified the risk, the next step is to figure out how you want to prioritize them, right? If you'd like, if you had the whole infinite team, you could just send the army of people to go fix everything. Um, but I'd like to know kind of then once you've identified the risk, how do you prioritize them for assessment and then remediation after that? I'll let Sadiq go first on this one, but John, I'll give you the first for the next one.
No worries.
All good, all good. Yeah, I think again, this is not dissimilar to Iress or any other vendor, to be honest, in the industry. When it comes to prioritization, golden rule, thumb rule is always business, right? We all have to remember, regardless of we are working in technology or risk areas or even any other areas of technology or even non-technology sectors. Ultimately, it's the business which is the driver in all these conversations. So the best you can align your risk assessment and even remediation going forward to the business objective and the business strategy, I think that is the case to win you all the way till up to the board level, regardless of your management or your different committee meetings that you have at the C level. It's all about business, right? At the end of the day, business has to get the required benefit and the desired benefit and the outcome for that particular financial year. When it comes to prioritization for assessment, I would also like to mention that here you're having risk conversations, and in the risk conversations, you're talking about what is risk. Risk is all about uh, uh, amount of the future loss, right? Future loss to the business. Now, that future loss, you need to be able to convince yourself first that yes, there is a future loss. And once you put the hand on your heart and say, yes, you know what, you're convinced with this risk, which needs assessment, which needs a higher priority, and it's aligned with the business objectives, then you go ahead and vouch for it. And then my general approach is that you socialize the risk assessment. You want to get the priority that you like, and you want to you have that in your other team members, that yes, you know what, let's get together. And if you go single-handedly, most likely you will fail, regardless of the alignment with the business objective, because alone you cannot even assess and not even go ahead and remediate yourself. You need a team of people with different subject matter experts to be able to join you in that journey, and then take that to the fruition till the end. And then the start, which Jenny, you said about prioritization, I think it starts with the business strategy alignment, and then it starts with the impact that it can have in the future. If that risk is realized, what's going to happen to the business? So companies may use 3x3 matrix or 5x5 matrix on qualitative risk assessment, and based on high, medium, or low risk. Again, I don't want to get into the definitions of what's the meaning of high versus medium and low, but let's say it's a high risk identified and it needs a proper assessment where you want to just understand high is just inherent security risk, and now you want to get to this residual security risk, understand if you apply the controls that you already have in the firm, be it technology, process, or people, how it is translating into residual risk. And if the residual risk is still high, then you take it forward and prioritize it based on and then you of course you go ahead and suggest your method of treatment going forward to the business.
Okay, so just to kind of clarify there, you do look at the severity based on how much loss it could cause, right?
Exactly.
If the risk is realized, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously that's linked to the likelihood as well, because loss is one thing, but then likelihood has to play a role in that. For example, you may have a loss of, let's say, $2 million if that risk is realized, but what's the likelihood of that? I mean, what's the frequency?
Okay.
Maybe it's 1 out of 1,000. Okay, so then automatically everything goes to a different direction altogether, right?
Okay. So those are two factors then that go into severity ratings then. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. John, you're up.
Yeah. I mean, risk management is a well-trodden path, and as I said, every organization is going to have some form of way of measuring likelihood and consequences, and ultimately, you'll get a series of buckets that all your risks go into, and some will be intolerance and some won't, and you'll work towards those. I think the real challenge that comes is, how do you explain them to the rest of the business? And to Sadiq's comment about socializing, it's really important to make sure that that you're talking to the right people in your organization, and it's not always necessarily the most obvious people to be talking to, right? So you might have a risk, and the people that are particularly able to fix it might actually not be the ones you need to convince initially. So it's really important that you take the time to sit back and look at your own company and its ways of working. Is it a personality-led organization? Is it a governance-led organization? And figure out what what is going to motivate those people to achieve the outcome you want. And again, awareness, making sure you take the time to explain to the stakeholders the actual concern, not the sort of high technical specifics that we as practitioners might think of a problem. Business language, we need to boil it down into something that the people who can actually drive the change will understand and accept and get behind. And sometimes you don't get that right, and sometimes you don't get the answer you're looking for, right? Because the organization, there's lots of stuff going on in any organization at any one time. Security likes to see itself as the center of the universe, and frankly, we're not, right? We're only part of the story. And so if you don't get the response you're kind of expecting from the owners of the risk or the management or whoever it happens to be, step back and try to think out why, and think, what's a different approach? How can I try again in a different way to get the outcome you're after? So yeah, it can be a bit of an iterative thing sometimes. Everyone's different. At the end of the day, this is a people problem in terms of convincing stuff, and that means that unfortunately we do need to understand the other side of that conversation and what motivates them.
Yeah, as somebody who works in the cybersecurity side of things with you guys, it kind of sucks to hear, but it's a reality that it may boil down to other priorities. Like you said, personality could be just its own factor, looking at what the other stakeholders are caring about over what you're prioritizing. You could tell them, like Sadiq said, it's going to be a $2 million loss, but then they're going to come back at you. But he comes back with a great example of priority because there's a really good chance this is going to happen,
Yep.
So I think you guys both called out really good things to take into account when it comes to prioritizing these risks. So that brings us to the next thing of the remediation process. So we all have different resources available to us when it comes to the remediations. And there's definitely a distinction I'd like to make too when it comes to dealing with internal risk and then also that third party risk. So John, your focus is really on that internal side of things. Am I right on that?
Yeah, my current role.
So we can actually talk with you first on this. It works out perfectly about what are some common challenges? You listed some with the personalities, but what are some other ones that occur internal remediation for risks?
Yeah, so competing priorities and business alignment, right? They're really important things to understand within your organization and to slot into, right? So if as a security function, if you're out to the side and you're working not in tune with the business, you're going to have a hard time, right? So it's really important that you, as I said, you take that time to understand your own organization, and you tailor your responses to get the most out of that. You need to understand what motivates those people. What does success look for those teams, and make sure that your approach aligns with that. Education and awareness of the problem is also a huge part of this. At the end of the day, we can't expect people to fix stuff or to do better if they don't know that they've got a problem. And so that identification and awareness and explaining to people the situation is really, really important. And you might deliver that through things like metrics. You might deliver that through workshops or one-on-one conversations, or what it's going to be, or publishing stats, right? However you choose to do it as an organization, you need to, as I said, you need to make sure everyone is on the same page and they understand the consequences and things like that. And then you can have really quite productive conversations about, well, how do I fix this? When can it be done? Is there any dependencies, right? Sometimes what seems to be a really simple thing to fix, when you peel it back and understand what's going under the scenes, could be quite complicated. There might be the need to replace equipment. There might be software dependencies that come into play. And so then the conversation needs to change to be, well, maybe we can't fix whatever this thing is quickly. What can we do to compensate in the meantime? And so, that then, you might end up with a whole discovery workshop of your own, just trying to deal with trying to recover. So yeah, I think it's been collaborative with the business and really not being seen as an outsider is what drives the best outcome, I think.
Yeah, I think especially in that education portion of things, you gain that trust too, that you know what you're talking about and you're not just speaking out of nowhere, trying to give them busy work essentially, right? Because I imagine that is probably some pushback too, saying, hey, we're already swamped. Last thing we need is you to add on a whole nother project that's came out of left field because you think it's a priority, right? But
Yeah,
if they
absolutely.
trust your judgment, it sounds like it. That's awesome.
Because they all have customer deliveries, right? They're all under the pump for their own things.
Right.
Nobody in a product team wants to deliver bad things. So it is a negotiation, and it is a coming to a common sense and agreement of what's important priorities. And
Yeah, I guess in a way, cybersecurity with the auditing portion too, right? Is that we kind of get pointed out that all the mistakes that somebody else has made, right? So, and then everyone loves hearing about that, I'm sure.
yeah, it's different hats for different parts of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about you, Sadiq? What are some internal remediation challenges that you've got?
Yeah, to be honest, I fully sympathize and agree with John. It's definitely competing priorities. It's definitely the education awareness piece. It's definitely socializing, but to us, it's a bit more than that as well, and it's very specific to our industry, and that's why I think the introduction of Aware was useful in this conversation. And I'll go back to the introduction again and just to remind the audience here and yourselves as well that we are a non-profit organization. So every dollar that we have to spend, that needs to be justified to the board, and that's extremely important. And that saving goes back to the members who are putting their hard-earned income and savings into our accounts and for their retirement, right? They want to have their safe and healthy retirements. So that's our goal. That's our business goal all the time. So as you can imagine now that these internal conversations, it starts with time and cost, right? You need to have that cost benefit analysis, risk and reward analysis to be able to justify on the paper, on the slides, whatever you call it, with the facts and figures. Okay, and they have to be authentic with proper source. And then when you explain that story in the form of stats, in the form of facts, and you show them the current state and the target state, show them the current risk that you have in the environment based on that particular identification that you have done, and then you show them the solution that you're recommending. And with this solution, with the current set of controls already in play, what is the risk? What is the pre-deployment risk versus the post-deployment risk? And then when you explain them that story of pre and post and take them to the journey of start to end, then they're kind of buying into it. And that buy-in is extremely important. And it all comes with education. It all comes with a proper awareness of the entire story. But another thing I want to highlight here, which is extremely important, I think, in a big organizations like us, you're talking about professional lexicon, right? I mean, think about a technical technologist, in a technical team, security operations, anyone like that. You ask him about vulnerability, he'll give you one definition of a vulnerability. Whereby if you go to the risk department and you ask them about vulnerability or this system is vulnerable, they will think in a different mindset altogether. And the same vulnerability definition, you go to this board member, he will have his own version of the definition. So I think it's extremely important when you are presenting your business case to the management and to the broader teams, you start with a pure definitions, which are standard definitions across the board. So they start with their thinking with you, along with you through the journey, with the common definitions that everybody can benefit, and then you build your case and your floors based on that.
Do you mean like a common language that you share?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And you state that very clearly in the beginning of your business case as well, so that everybody's on the same page and they don't start thinking in different directions.
Yeah, and it's very important that everyone's on the same page with meetings, because it's very easy for miscommunications to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think you call out also a really specific thing to industry can cause resource limitations. Um, and also you have to really keep the customers in mind too, like think about how it's going to impact them, the choices that you make. And I think that's a really great way to just get on the same page with everybody because you're working for the same company, even not the same department.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you do has to be at the end of the mind, for the customer. So.
Mhm. So we're gonna go to third party then. When you have to. So I know, John, you actually had the perspective of being the third party. So we could have you start with that perspective, and then we'll have Sadiq. You could give your experience with third party.
Sure.
But the challenge is there because it is different from
Mm.
the internal remediation process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so what's interesting is for us, as you said, being more often on the other side of this process, it does end up becoming an internal risk process, right? Because the input comes from one of our suppliers, but sorry, customers, but ultimately we have to deal with it internally. But in terms of the third party process, it's quite a lot of work, right? And it's if you've got a large number of customers and they all want their piece of that process, it very quickly spirals out of an unmanageable amount of work for a security team. And in fact, I've worked in a number of organizations where the effort to maintain the third party work against their customers is actually the majority of what the security team does. And the trouble is that if they're spending all of their time answering questionnaires and so forth, they're not actually fixing anything. They're not actually improving security, and so it's actually counterproductive to the customer. And so this is what I was saying earlier in the back room. As a process, I think there's so much scope between the vendors and the clients and people like yourselves to really streamline and make this process work better for everyone. Because it is a relationship. It is a partnership between all of these parties. And we do need to consider the impact on the other party when we create these third-party management programs to ensure that we get the right outcome we want in terms of vendor management, but at the same time, our vendors are able to do their best job as well.
You're right with the whole partnership that it creates, that relationship, and as the one receiving those reports that tell you, hey, you have these deficiencies, we need you to fix. Yeah, I think it'd be great to get it to a point where it feels like that's like a thank you for letting me know I had a booger hanging out of my nose. Like I'd like someone to tell me, and take that as like a wow, we didn't even have to go our own way to find this out, and thank you for telling us this opportunity to improve ourselves. It's a partnership. Um, you said another note there too about how we can make that easier, and then we are not wasting our time repeating, the process over and over for different companies. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity there for time savers, where we don't just keep doing the same things over and over. That we could just easily share the profiles, share responses and answers. We already know what we're supposed to say, what our answer is to certain processes, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, from the announcements from today, there's lots of really good stuff that UpGuard's released that's going to help with that. I think as consumers of other people's services, that we also play a role in adjusting our programs to take that evidence, right? So, if your supplier has gone to a whole lot of effort to produce some collateral about how they manage their service, and whether they publish that to you via a platform like UpGuard, or whether they publish to you that sort of directly, don't ignore it. Take it, read it, see if it
Mhm.
answers your questions, before you just immediately kind of issue your own custom questionnaire, because the process has to be done your way. I mean, if you can take from your vendors that work and it answers your questions, great, fantastic, job done. You've saved yourself a bunch of time and so forth. So I think, again, as an industry, those of us that have to build third-party programs need to also realize it's not just about what we might design as a program, but it needs to be able to also accept collateral material from the vendors, as a way of reducing workload and speeding up things and getting a better outcome for everyone.
Yeah, and I know that UpGuard has worked really hard to make it a seamless process to transfer, especially if someone's looking at UpGuard for the first time, making it seamless to see what there is expected of them and then just provide those answers, provide that information, respond, fix, and then have that all in the same dialogue on the same page. So that seamless transition from party to party is really important to making the relationship a positive one, I feel. Um, and so, yeah, Sadiq, you get to listen from ideal third party to
Yeah,
your
yeah.
responding side.
No, when John was talking, I was thinking the completely opposite, right? I mean, we have different challenges altogether. I mean, Iress is just one very nice vendor that we have on our panel, and we have just on a high level, I think we have over 1,000 vendors that we have to worry about. But good thing is that we have got a framework in place, a procurement management framework, whereby we categorize the vendors based on different parameters. Like, for example, the business engagement value. Uh, that's one very important factor. For example, you may have a vendor supplying you stationery versus you may have a vendor like Iress providing you financial software, and you may have a vendor providing you a cloud service. So how do you differentiate? Obviously, the level of controls and the level of assessment that you need to do on a stationary vendor versus the top-notch vendor like Iress or similar, it will be very different, right, in terms of maturity and of the controls in their environment and in the technology stack. So what we do is we categorize the vendors based on the information security classification we say internally, which links with, again, industry standard, CIA, sensitivity, confidentiality, integrity, and availability part of it. And we classify. We have got a proper information classification standard that we follow as a firm, and I'm sure other big firms do the same, more or less. And then we once we classify the information being handled, and I think it again links back to the introduction. We as an industry are regulated by different regulators in Australia, like, for example, APRA and ASIC. And APRA is doing a very good job in terms of bringing the regulations up front for third-party risk management, information security risk management, which is CPS 234. Many of the audiences would know about it. So again, we are obligated towards providing the right level of detail and making sure that, yes, information that our information, our business information, our member information, especially the personally identifiable information, PII information we call it, that is safely and securely handled either internally or even with the third parties. So wherever there's an exchange of information where the third parties who are accessing, storing, processing our information, our member information, we need to make sure that they are up to the par in terms of information security controls along the way. Yeah.
So one of the priorities with the third parties that you have to hold them to a really high standard depending on, I guess, what risk they pose to your organization.
Exactly.
Yeah, and definitely the type of data, even though all data is essentially important, can lead to bad things if it gets exposed. Is still, can be categorized by severity and what it's going to cause to your organization.
Exactly.
I also love that you called Iress top-notch vendor. That was a great little note there.
Yeah, look, we understand the needs of our clients, and we absolutely want to do the best that we can for them. But it's a scale issue. We need to work out how we deliver this confidence to our clients, in a manner that allows us to also improve things and not consume huge amounts of resources and stuff. So yeah.
And so with the remediations that you request and send in, obviously you have your case that you make about how much this is going to protect the company based, with your prioritizations and severity ratings. Outside, I'm sure, out of our regular just straight up scoring of 800 out of 950, but there's other factors that come into play, like you said, categorizing of your vendors. Are you able to predict what the improvement to their UpGuard score is going to be based on the remediating risk? I don't need a super long answer for this one. It's just kind of like, do you guys have a method that you use to predict how much an improvement it's going to make to their UpGuard score?
We go through a lot of chickens, trying to work out what the score change might be.
Mm-hmm.
I think is realistically the position we've been to date.
Okay, it's about the same for you, Sadiq.
I'll add a few words here, both in favor of UpGuard and kind of improvement for UpGuard as well, to be honest. And I think there's no harm in sharing that to the audience as well. I think UpGuard, I've been working on UpGuard for the last 3 years, and I've seen them growing tremendously and then providing very nice and neat features to help us solve the problem of third-party risk assessments, all the way from the beginning, all the way till now. Excellent delivery so far. But I think where UpGuard needs to improve further is yes, it's good that yes they are able to forecast the score based on the online presence of the firms, but I think it's very important that they can come up with a scenario or with a position on the platform whereby they can combine multiple parameters and then be able to reconcile and consolidate those parameters and give us the real picture of the third party. Not only just based on online presence, and at times online presence is also just looking at the public website. And what we want to see is that we want to be able to, as a customer, we want to be able to include our that particular web application where our information is stored and processed in the UpGuard, and UpGuard should be able to detect any kind of security control weaknesses in that particular web application, and then be able to alarm us on the specific score going up or down. I think that's very important. And then that's also linked with the different risk assessment, the outcomes that are coming from the third-party questionnaire that they complete, and then the risks are coming out. I think those have to tie in together and give us a consolidated view of, as a company, what is our third-party risk, and so that we can take that report, understand it, analyze it, and then everything looks green, or even otherwise, we can then take it to the board level and then explain them where are we standing today and what we need to do in order to get to the right place.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of a risk mapping and using just the data to really hone in on metrics to give solid, information about what kind of impact this is going to have. Because you can say predictive things forever, but it's all what if situation, which is kind of the game we play, the what if scenarios all the time.
And you need to apply the business context as well, right? I mean, yes, maybe the one particular score on a specific vendor could be, let's say, plus minus 10. Now that minus 10 for this particular type of the vendor could be minus 100 because it's a material vendor, So that context is kind of missing at the moment. I think that needs to be flourished further, and we need to update and upgrade the profile within UpGuard on that. Yeah.
That makes sense. You actually got a question, Sadiq. Do you require your vendors to provide SOC 2 report?
Definitely. I mean, attestation are one specific thing that we expect as part of the questionnaire response that we expect from the vendors. But as part of the attestation, we do certain validations, and that depends again on the type of the vendor. If it's a material vendor or tier 1 vendor, then definitely the vendors like Iress or like they are there. They provide that kind of comfort to us in terms of security controls, attestation, and then validation. And that validation can be in the form of SOC reports, can be in the form of top 5 or top 4 people going to their site, doing the site surveys and doing the full third-party detailed audit or across entire information security spectrum, and then provide us that validation that, yes, you know what, controls are there, they're designed appropriately, but they're not only designed, but they are also working effectively. And that's most important for a client, for any client, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in your industry too. That one I've heard is pretty invaluable.
Exactly.
All right, so that's all we've got time for today, gentlemen. So thank you, Sadiq and John, for speaking with me today. It was a lot of fun. I found this conversation insightful. I know the rest of my team did, and I hope everyone in the audience did as well. And also, for everyone's knowledge, we have an upcoming webinar in 2 weeks where we're going to share our research findings on the security posture of top 200 Australian companies. So with that, thank you again for attending today.
Thank you, Jerry, for hosting us. Take care.
Thank you, Jenny.
See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
See ya.